Yellow rings. Wait. Yellow rings and get back to the warm green living forest of the in-between place when they came to two huge doors, some metal that might possibly be gold. One stood a little ajar, so of course they went back to look in. Both started back and drew a long breath, for here at last was something worth seeing. For a second they thought the room was full of people, hundreds of people, all seated and all perfectly still. Polly and Diggory, as you may have guessed, stood perfectly still themselves. For a good long time, looking in, but presently they decided that what they were looking at could not be real. There was no movement nor the sound of a breath among them all. They were like the most beautiful waxworks you ever saw. This time Polly took the lead. There was something in this room which interested her more than it interested Diggory. All of the figures were wearing magnificent clothes. If you were interested in clothes at all, you could hardly help yourself going to see them closer, and the blaze of the colors made this room look not exactly cheerful, but at any rate rich and majestic after all the dust and the emptiness of the others. It had more windows too, and was a great deal lighter. I can hardly describe the clothes. The figures were all robed and had crowns. Were all robed and had crowns, not robbed, robed, and had crowns on their heads. Their robes were crimson and silvery gray, and deep purple and vivid green. The picture at the top is what they're describing. And there were patterns and pictures of flowers and strange beasts and needlework all over them. Precious stones of astonishing size and brightness stared from their crowns and hung in chains around their necks and peeped out from all the places where anything was fastened. Why haven't those clothes been rotted away long ago? Asked Polly. Magic, whispered Diggory. Can't you feel it? I bet this whole room is just stiff with enchantments. I could feel it the moment I came in. Any of these dresses would probably cost hundreds of pounds, said Polly, but Diggory was more interested in the faces, and indeed these were well worth looking at. The people sat in their stone chairs on each side of the room, and the floor was left free down the middle. You could walk down and look at the faces in turn. They were nice people, I think, said Diggory. Polly nodded. All the faces they could see were certainly nice. Both men and women looked kind and wise, and they seemed to come of a handsome race. But after the children had gone a few steps down the room, they came to faces that looked different. These were very solemn faces. You felt would have to mind your P's and Q's if you ever met the living people who looked like that. When they had gone a little bit further, they found themselves among faces that they didn't like. This was the middle of the room. The faces here looked very strong, proud, and happy. But they looked cruel. A little further on, they looked crueler, and further on again. They were still cruel, but they no longer looked happy. They were even despairing faces, as if the people they had belonged to had done dreadful things and also suffered dreadful things. The last figure of all was the most interesting. A woman, even more richly dressed than the others, very tall, but every figure in that room was taller than the people of our world, with a look of such fierceness, pride, that it took your breath away. Yet she was beautiful too. Years afterward, when he was an old man, Diggory said he had never seen in all his life seen a woman or known a woman so beautiful. It was only fair to add that Polly was also always said she couldn't see anything specifically beautiful about her. This woman, as I said, was the last, but there were plenty of empty chairs beyond her, as if the room had been intended for a much larger collection of images. I do wish we knew the story that's behind all this, said Diggory. Let's go back and look at that table sort of thing in the middle of the room. The thing in the middle of the room was not exactly a table. It was a square pillar about 4 feet high, and on it there rose a little golden arch, from which there hung a little golden bell. And beside this lay a little golden hammer to hit the bell with. I wonder, said Diggory. There seems to be something written here, said Polly, stooping down and looking at the side of the pillar. By gum, so there is, said Diggory. But of course we shan't be able to read it. Shan't we? I'm not sure. They both looked at it hard. As you might have expected, the letters were cut in stone, were very strange. But now a great wonder happened, for as they looked, though the shape of the strange letters never altered, they found that they could understand them, if only Diggory had remembered what he himself had said a few minutes ago, that this was an enchanted room. He might have guessed that the enchantment was beginning to work, but he was too wild with his curiosity to think about that. He was longing for more and more to know what was written on the pillar. And very soon they both knew what it said was something like this. At least this is the sense of it through the poetry when you read it there was better. Make your choice, adventurous stranger. Strike the bell and bide the danger, or wander till it drives you mad. What would have followed if you had? No fear, said Polly. We don't want any danger. Oh, but don't you see it's no good, said Diggory. We can't get out of it now. We shall always be wondering what else would have happened if we had struck the bell. I'm not going home to be driven mad by always thinking of that. No fear. Don't be silly, said Polly, as if anyone would. What does it matter what would have happened? I expect who's come as far as this is bound to go on wondering till it sends him Dotty. What's the magic of it? You see, I can feel it beginning to work on me already. Well, I don't, said Polly crossly, and I don't believe you do either. You're just putting it on. That's all you know, said Diggory. It's because you're a girl. Girls never want to know anything but gossip and rot about people getting engaged. You looked exactly like your uncle when you said that, said Polly. Why can't you keep to the point, said Diggory. What we're talking about is how exactly like a man, said Polly in a very grown-up voice. but she added hastily in her real voice, "And don't say I'm just like a woman, or you'll be a beastly copycat." "I should never dream of calling a kid like you a woman," said Diggory loftily. "Oh, I'm a kid, am I?" said Polly, who was now in a real rage. "Well, you don't need to be, you needn't be bothered by having a kid with you any longer then. I'm off. I've had enough of this place, and I've had enough of you. You beastly, stuck-up, obstinate, none of that," said Diggory, in a voice even nastier than he meant it to be. He saw Polly's hand move to her pocket to get a hold of her yellow ring. I can't excuse what he did next except by saying that he was very sorry for it afterward, and so were a good many other people. Before Polly's hand reached her pocket, he grabbed her wrist, leaning across her with his back against her chest. Then, keeping her other arm out of the way, with his other elbow, he leaned forward, picked up the hammer, and struck the golden bell at a light, smart tap. Then he let her go, and they fell apart, staring at each other and breathing hard. Polly was just beginning to cry, not with fear, and not even because he had hurt her wrist quite badly, but with furious anger. Within 2 seconds, however, they had something to think about that drove their own quarrels out of their mind. As soon as the bell was struck, it gave out a note, a sweet note, such as you might have expected, and not very loud, but instead of dying away, it went on, and as it went on, it grew louder. But before a minute had passed, it was twice as loud as it had been to begin with. It was soon so loud that if the children had tried to speak, but they weren't thinking of speaking now, they were just standing with their mouths open, they would not have been able to hear one another. Very soon it was so loud that they could not have even heard each other by shouting. And still it grew, all on one note, a continuous sweet sound, though the sweetness had something terrible, something horrible about it, till the air in the great room was throbbing with it, and they could feel the stone floor trembling under their feet. Then, at last, it began to mix with another sound, a vague, disastrous noise, which sounded at first like a roar of a distant train, and then like the crash of a falling tree. They heard something like a great weight falling. Finally, with a sudden rush and a thunder and a shake that nearly flung them off their feet, about a quarter of the roof at one end of the room fell in. Great blocks of masonry fell all around them, and the walls rocked. The noise of the bell even stopped. The clouds of dust cleared away. Everything became quite quiet again. It was never found out whether the fall of the roof was due to the magic, or whether that unbearably loud sound from the bell just happened to strike the note, which was more than those crumbling walls could stand. "There, I hope you're satisfied now," panted Polly. "Oh, it's all over anyway," said Diggory, and both thought it was, but they had never before been more mistaken in their lives. Yep, that's next time.